Dogwood Drive to Wade Avenue, Park Drive from Oberlin to St. Mary's, and Van Dyke Avenue from Gardner Street to Oberlin. So if you have opinions and want to go and have your opinions heard, whether you're for it or against it, this is your time to get up and tell council what your feelings are.
You can say the day and date.
Yes, it is Tuesday, February 4th at 7 o'clock, and it is in the City Council chambers. Also, I wanted to let you all know that next month we are going to be having a courtesy rezoning proposal, Z120, which is, some of you probably heard about this, they are proposed continuing care retirement living on Oberlin Road, right next to Daniels Middle School. It's a 5-acre tract. Out of currently Country Club Homes is 20 acres. This is for 5 acres. Now, the dividing line between us and 5 Points is Oberlin. So a lot of the people who will be directly affected live right across the street from the project, which is our CAC. So Michael Burks, the attorney for the proposed development, contacted me. He would like to come, and I think they would even like to have a vote, even though one's not, you know, so what they normally do, how we do it in rezoning, they present at one meeting, hear feedback and concerns, and then the following meeting, we'll take a vote. Even though it's, we're, like I said, we're technically not the CAC, but it is just, we're on the other side of the street. And then also, if you remember a year or two ago, the Bellwood condos, they have recently been sold again. There's another proposed rezoning there, which I understand is very similar to what was they were proposing 2 years ago, I think it was. So at some point, that's going to be coming back to us. All right, so those are all my announcements. All right, Officer Upchurch is going to be here with the Raleigh Police Report.
Okay, so these are the 911 reportable crimes for the last 30 days. So there's a lot of things, you know, if you were here months and years in the past, there was a lot of things that I went over. And those were like crimes that happened, things that happened that didn't generate a report. So unfortunately now we can only run the things that generate a report, and that's why it sounds less than. So we only had 5, actually it was pretty good in this area, 5 damage to property calls. We had 3 assaults. We had, 3 communicating threats, 16 assaults. We had 6 frauds, 5 larcenies, we had 5 shoplifters. We have one vehicle break-in, but let me kind of stop right there because we are seeing an increase in vehicle break-ins. It's not necessarily in your area, but don't get a false sense of security. They can easily come over to your area. So since I got a whole room full of people, I say this all the time, but I'm gonna say it again real quick. So to keep your vehicle totally safe, perpetrators are gonna come up. They're gonna check door handles. If yours is unlocked, they're gonna hop in. They're gonna rummage around. They're gonna take whatever's in there. So don't ever forget and leave stuff in there and leave your vehicle unlocked. Okay, so if they come up, they check door handles. If it's locked, but they look inside and they see a laptop, or they see your purse, or they see a wallet, or they see change, anything of value, it's just a piece of glass. They will break it. So the whole moral of this is don't leave anything of value inside your vehicle, lock your vehicle, and don't leave a spare ignition key inside of your vehicle, because a lot of our stolen vehicles come from simply unlocked vehicles where a teenager that hops in there and runs around, they find their ignition key, they crank the car up, and they go right on down the road. And then they look in the glove box, and sometimes they find a firearm that's locked in there, or not locked, I'm sorry, an unlocked firearm. And so now you've given a teenager a stolen car, and you've given them a firearm, and they're going down the road to perpetrate another crime. And it happens just like that all the time. So, you know, just follow those rules, get in good habits, and your vehicle will never be broken into. If they look inside and there's nothing in there, you've taken away their, you know, the motivation for a vehicle break-in. 3 vehicles were stolen, but let me just kind of stop right here because we are kind of seeing in other parts of the district where on this cold spurt that we have, where everybody runs out and cranks up their vehicle and then leaves it idling out there. Oh, well, yeah, we've had a lot of, groups of teenagers going around stealing vehicles, so don't let that happen to you.
You're giving teenagers a really bad rap.
Well, but I say young people,
Yeah.
because it turns out they're young people, it's the brains. So, and some of the perpetrators were some that did it last summer, it's the same group of kids that were doing it last summer, so, last winter. So just, be safe, you gotta go out there, you gotta sit in the car, you gotta put on your coat, and sit there until the car warms up, so, yeah. Or your car may go down the road with somebody. And then one drive volunteer in this particular area, so there was not a whole lot to report. Does anybody have anything that you would like for me to take back to the beat officers? No? Okay, January, February, just kinda like the road is on idle, so I gotta give a report, so I'll see you next time.
Thank you. And Dan Bacon from Parks and Rec.
Hey guys, welcome to my house. If you haven't been here before, Dan Bacon, I run this place. Some good news for me, just to tell you all, January 19th, I celebrated 20 years in the city. Worked out by very quick, very quick. I enjoy it very much. Something at the desk, if you want to pick it up, is some of the highlights that are going on through our department. Summer camp's coming up, that's the biggest one. My camps fill up in less than, usually about 2 minutes.
Wow.
So, if you're not on, you're not getting in my house. And the reason you want to be in my house is because I'm the best. That's why you want me here, that's why I fill up in 2 minutes. We also have our sports program started. Baseball registration is starting on Monday. That is not a first come, first served. They'll take you during the registration period. So if you know anybody that's younger, it's from 5 to 17 in that range, and we play throughout the city. Also, I want to thank Donna for being willing to spearhead, getting the dog run, going with the chips and stuff.
Let me just make a comment about that.
That's a big thing.
For those of you who use JC Park Dog Park, we just had some wood chips dropped. We're probably gonna need a work day to spread them, because they haven't really gotten back to me, but.
I know, I saw it kind of.
Yeah, so be on the lookout, and, probably an hour or two on a Saturday morning, we'll get it done, and, it benefits so many people.
I saw, several piles of wood chips, a couple of them in the dog park and some of them outside of the dog park.
Neil, I saw the string when I got back.
Yeah, okay.
Neil has talked about getting his guys to put those in
Okay.
there, so that when it's ready for that day, they'd all be in the dog.
All right.
But I wanted to.
We'll put something out.
I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks for.
Thank you for spearheading that. Let's see. So we're kind of, when y'all came in, it was a lot of kids. That's our basketball season. We're about halfway through, so they're having a lot of fun. And keep my assistant director in your prayers. Her grandfather passed away. So she is in Texas right now. Some of you may have seen her. Her name is Tamara. She's a wonderful lady. But just keep her in your prayers. They got a lot going on. She can't be with her grandparents all the time because she's here and they're there. So, she's back there right now dealing with all that. So I know there's a wonderful time of the season. Happy New Year. Also, a tough time for people, things going on like that. So thank you all for coming. This is a really good showing tonight. So it's really cool. A lot of people here. And my kids are doing fantastic. And I got to go to Mexico last week. So that was cool.
Nice.
I've never been to Mexico. That place, Cabo San Lucas or something like that, was it was awesome. So thank you. Have a wonderful night. If you need anything, drop your name and number at the front desk. My staff that's up there, your question, and I'll get you back as soon as I can.
Great, thank you, Dan.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, and we have a presentation
Yeah,
about
you're
the
fine.
US Census and jobs, both the census and jobs. Okay, so, Mr. Wilkins, Kenneth Wilkins, and you're gonna have to tell me your name. Laura? Well, okay, just Laura, okay. Do you need, are you showing anything here? No. Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Kenneth Wilkins with U.S. Census Bureau. We've got a limited amount of time, so I'm going to be fast and then turn it over to Laura, who's going to talk about the need for employment that we have. It's a huge need. The census is coming April 1, it's Census Day. About the third week in March, you will get a postcard with a barcode on the back, and that barcode is what you use to reply to the census. The census, as you know, is every 10 years. Census is used for a number of things. It's really, when you boil it down, it's about power and money. The power, because we elect congressmen based on districts, and our other folks who run for different offices. Those district lines are based on the U.S. Census. In 2000, The response rate in Wade County was 76%. In 2010, it was 78%. The governor would like to see us get up to about 82%. So we've got a job to do. We're in the right direction. We want to keep going. We have 13 congressional seats. With a really good count, we could have another seat. A great count, we may pick up 2 seats. In order for us to pick up a seat, another state has to lose a seat. So no one talks about it in terms of a competition, but it really is a competition. Other states have put a lot of money into their effort, and they picked up seats. South Carolina picked up additional seats in 2010. So that's the representation part. And because there are only 435 congressional seats, they're not making any more, we need to increase our number from 13 to 14 or 15. Now the money part, $675 billion will be distributed among all 50 states every year for 10 years starting in 2021. We need to make sure that we get our fair share of those funds. Those are funds that are paid in taxes, so if we don't get our fair share, there's another state getting it as well. For the first time, you'll be able to reply to the census using any electronic device, your laptop, your cell phone, your desktop. If you're not comfortable with the technology or don't want to use it, you can also use a telephone, or you can request a ballot in the mail. So April 1 is Census Day. We need to make sure we count everyone. We missed 1 million children in 2010 because a lot of different reasons, but one of the main reasons is people might have thought that a child under 5 didn't count. So we need to count everyone who's on our soil, April 1, on our soil and the soil of our territories. So everyone gets counted, doesn't matter what legal status, anybody here, we need to make sure we count them. So please respond in a timely manner. A lot of people say, well, I don't want anyone coming to my house. We don't have to come to your house if you respond. And if you don't answer all of the questions, it's a very short questionnaire. If you don't answer all of them, there's a good chance someone might come and knock on your door. But they should be easily identified with a badge and some other information as well. So please reply. Yes, sir.
Why did you choose April Fool's Day?
I have no idea. That's above my pay grade.
That's a statistical thing, that's about it.
Now, this flyer is a basic primer. Census 101 gives you all the basic information. There are a number of those left in the back. So thank you for your attention. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm going to turn it over to Laura.
I just have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think you're gonna have more problems this year counting, maybe undocumented people because of the fear that they might be turned in, or how are you gonna count those people?
Well, we're hoping we won't, but we know there are some challenges. There are folks in every community who do not want to respond to the government. I will tell you what we formed in this state. We started out by meeting with every county manager, and we made presentations to every board of commissioners. We've asked them to do 2 things. 1, endorse the 2020 census, and 2, endorse the formation of what we call complete count committees. Complete count committees are committees in the community made up of the trusted voices within the community. Wade County has a great complete count committee. Just about every other county has one as well. So what you want to do is anytime you see a challenge, and that's a challenge, is you want to bring trusted voices from that community onto the committee so that they can help you get the word out within those populations. So that's how we're addressing the hard to count. It's not just members of certain communities, mainly Hispanic community, but it's also our veterans, our low-income citizens, our rural citizens, renters, because renters move around a lot. So every challenge we're trying to meet by placing people on the complete count committee who are trusted within those communities.
And that's probably a great segue for me, because as a recruiting assistant, we're looking for census takers in every community and people that speak every language. We try to have census takers do addresses that are closest to their houses. So if we try to get people where they live, because they know who is in their community, who's not, who lives next door and who doesn't. So then, if you do go to an address and you know Mr. Wilson, who's 94, lives there and he doesn't ever answer the door, you can count him even if he doesn't fill out the form and mail it back or have anybody come. In Wade County, we're hiring census field supervisors. We're hiring them right now and putting them in place. Once they're in place, we're gonna be hiring clerks and the actual census takers. And in Wade County, you get $17 to $19 per hour. It is part-time temporary. We ask that you give us a minimum of 8 weeks and 20 hours a week. It is mainly on the weekends in the evening, so even if you do work full-time, such as myself, you can still partake and help your community and make sure everybody is counted and understands the importance of the census. The application, you do it online, and it is like the simplest application you will ever have done. We don't, we're not concerned about your work history. We're not concerned about where you lived the last 10 years. We're not worried about your salary. Probably the hardest part about applying is coming up with a password that's 12 characters, lowercase, and a number, and a special character, and everything. But we're here to help. I'm here to help. I've got a sign-up sheet in the back. If you're interested, I can send you more information. I've even got a laptop here if you want to take some 15, 20 minutes is all it takes to fill out an application. I've also got business cards and other flyers you can take home, post around your community. If you know somebody that's living at home still and it's time for them to get out and get a job, this is a great place to start. Because you can do 20 to 40 hours a week. Pay is weekly, which is also a nice benefit.
Do you need a car?
Not necessarily. You need reliable transportation, so like if you live in downtown or a place where you can work, go ahead and apply. Also, if you've made some mistakes or you know somebody that's made some mistakes in the past, they can go ahead and apply. If we offer them a job, once we do the background check, we can address any issues that may come up with that. You don't necessarily need to be a U.S. citizen, but you do need to be a resident eligible to work in the U.S. And we are such an international community, we need interpreters. Any language that you can think of, we need interpreters. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. So I applied a while ago. And I occasionally will get an email. but
Okay.
How will I be notified of the actual job opportunity?
They will call.
Okay.
They will call and offer you. We've taken thousands of applications because it does take a while, and we've been taking applications for a while. So in my case, I applied May 19th. They called me at the end of June with an offer, did fingerprints July 6th, and they didn't call me until December 4th. And then asked me to go to 3 days training the following week. And I was like, well, let me think about it and figure it out. And they're like, no, I need to know now.
Right.
Because we have so many applications.
Right. No, I'll
You
get
can
I'll get
talk
back
to them on
you
the
again.
phone for about 5 minutes, but you're not gonna have time to think about it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. And now there's going to be a comprehensive plan amendment, and David Brown, and go first, Matthew Clem from the city is going to tell us what this is all about, and then we'll hear more.
All right.
You need us to turn the lights out?
That would be great, yes.
Okay.
All right. Okay. And this is working.
Turn on.
Okay, now it's working. So I'm Matthew Clem. I work in the city planning department. I work in the comprehensive planning division. And so the work of our team is to manage the city's long-range plan, the 2030 comprehensive plan. That plan contains all sorts of policies and maps and ideas of how and where the city should grow in the future. And in managing that plan, we also respond to requests for changing the plan, which is what this is, a comprehensive plan amendment. So someone has requested to change one of the maps in the comprehensive plan, and that's the street plan. So the street plan identifies the type and location of new streets in the city. And it's represented with a dotted line like this. And so Street plan streets get built in one of two ways. They get built when property is redeveloped, or they get built with capital improvement projects, or CIP projects. Every year the city council makes a budget and they decide what infrastructure should be improved or built, and that is essentially the CIP program. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. So this is the section of street that is being proposed for removal. And so the street doesn't exist right now. This is a street that would be constructed sometime in the future. Right now, there's an apartment building there with 100 or so units. It's an extension of Morgan Street, south of Hillsborough here, an extension of West Morgan Street to Ash Avenue. And so what they're requesting to do is remove that section, just the section from Wakefield Avenue to Ash Avenue. And that's the request. And each of these streets that are planned has a certain designation. This type of street is called an avenue, two-laned, undivided, and that street would look like this. So there is a vehicle travel lane for motorists in either direction, a bicycle travel lane in either direction, street tree and verge, and a sidewalk. So this is a typical look of what that street might look like in the future. Here is just an aerial view of the area. You've got Morgan Street coming here, up to Hillsborough. This is Irregardless, Comedy Club, here just to orient you. The street plan currently shows a new street coming right through here. And so, our engineering department has laid out what this new street might look like. And you can see this parcel highlighted here. The property owners, the applicants, to change the street plan. They represent the interests of this property. And what you see is the extension of that street. The most likely alignment of that street cuts the property in half and leaves two pretty small remnants of the existing property today. And so at this point I want to talk about how these streets get built and what the city's responsibility is in constructing those streets. So state law gives municipalities the authority to require the dedication and construction of new streets. The amount of property owners' contribution to that street is tied to the transportation impact that is created by their proposed development. And so what we have here is an existing site that is served by two streets already, Wakefield and Ash Avenue. It's a small site, it's about 1.7 acres. And so the development of that property is not likely to create a severe increase to the traffic impact of the area. And so what is most likely to happen is that the city would either need to contribute largely to the building of that street or completely. So that means the city would likely need to buy the property, design and construct the street. And then these leftover parcels will be left there. And so you might be thinking, why would the city put a street on an existing apartment? We did that in an area plan that took place, I believe, in the early 2000s. It was the West Morgan small area plan. And the idea was to create a new block right here in this area. And that street was mapped. And now the property owners are saying, we don't want you to build that street anymore. We think, and the city agrees, that the building of that street will render these properties to a pretty low value. And that's really my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes?
It seems to me like that street would be very useful. Connecting downtown to Ash Avenue and places west.
Yeah, so the comment was, the gentleman thinks that the street would be useful to improve connectivity. And yes, I would agree with that. It does add extra vehicle, pedestrian, and bicycle connectivity from Ash Avenue into downtown. It could also potentially take traffic off of Hillsborough Street for those coming in from the western part of the city on Western Boulevard, coming up Ash Avenue, right there at Pullen Park. They're going to Hillsborough right now to get into downtown. This would add extra movements to that traffic as well, so yes.
So Does the city traffic engineering have any comments about removing that?
Yes, they've reviewed the request. We found overall that the request is inconsistent with the city's comprehensive plan and policies that would say, the city should encourage and improve connectivity and pedestrian and bicycle connectivity. It is inconsistent with some housing policies because likely what is to happen based on what the state tells us about who is responsible for building streets, most of this property is taken in the creation of that street. And so what is in all likelihood, if the property owners come in with a building permit or a site plan and say, we want to do this building, the city says, great, you've got to build this street. Show me on your plan how you do that. And then the property owners are left with these little itty bitty parcels that they probably can't do a whole lot with. They could probably still build a house or two, or maybe a small apartment or something like that. But in that situation, the city is faced with the legal question of, are we actually responsible for building this street connection? And if the city council and the planning commission think that is what in fact should happen, then the city can keep this on the plan. Because if it stays in the plan, what is likely to happen is that the city will buy the piece of property for greater than $6 million, design, and then construct the street itself. And to do that, the city would also, as the new owner of this property, have to demolish the apartment complex that provides 100 housing units. And so that's kind of the impasse we're at with the policy discussion here. So is something that is developed here creating such a traffic impact that street is necessary, or should the city take the street off the street plan, allow the housing to exist as it is, or allow the property to redevelop and still served by existing streets? Oh, sure.
Is it possible just to leave it on there and deal with this issue when the apartment building and the property owners want to redevelop?
So the question was, can we leave the street on the street plan and then deal with the issue when the property owners come to redevelop? The answer is, the construction of that street is in fact triggered by the application for a new building.
Then they could ask for a rezoning that eliminated that street, and it could be evaluated at that time.
So what happens is, if I'm developing this piece of property, I need to bring the city a drawing that both shows my building and that street. And if they want to build a small building here and here, then that's the building, that's the plan that would bring the city. And so they're preempting the first comment on the plan saying, where's my street, by removing it from the plan at this point.
So you're saying that there is new ownership on that property. I'm kind of sorry to hear that. I guess that's what the market is likely to do. But those little apartments there, I think rent for about $700 a month. So that's that little section of affordable, truly affordable housing is going to go away. Now, if just by changing our minds about the street we can avoid that, I would rather the extension not be put through. But what you're saying, there's a new owner, and that the new owner intends to develop it probably more expensive, probably fewer and more expensive units on that side. Is that correct?
That's fair, and I'll say one thing before I take your question. Any way the street gets built, those apartments go away. And so, is it the city taking it down to build the street, or are we still saying that the property owners build the street and then have some other smaller development on either side? In that case, the city would still be responsible for a lot of the costs of that project.
I was just gonna say, those, echo Sue's comment, those apartments are really tiny, they're little efficiencies. I mean, they're like 400 or 500 square feet, and I've been in one of those. I mean, there's probably not another development like that around, is there? And it'd be a shame to lose that affordable housing, really would.
Maybe, when, Withers Ravenel comes and speaks, will you be able to give us more information about what is proposed?
Yes.
Okay, so Matthew, don't go anywhere.
I won't.
And is it maybe time, David, for you to come and David Brown from Withers Ravenel, and Onworth.
And Matt, we may borrow your presentation, it's very good.
Oh, sure.
It's my old fashioned technology.
Tom, do you want to tee us up?
You're good.
My name is Tom Worth. I'm an attorney, sole practitioner in Raleigh for 50 years, and so as a native of Raleigh. And so I've been doing this.
I can't hear you.
I've been doing this for this type of work 40 years of the 50 that I've been practicing. Moving quickly to this situation, what we have here, and Mr. Clem has indicated, West Morgan and Ash. This was a proposed removal of the entire extension that I filed in 2016 in behalf of these property owners right here. MMP LLC, two brothers and sisters, Raleigh origins, none of them are here now, living here. That case I filed in 2016. It went ultimately to the City Council, to the Planning Commission, then to the Council, and was turned down. At that time, I departed this matter. Another attorney, a very fine attorney, was hired by my former clients, and he pursued relief from this road for the next almost 2 years. In September of this year, of 2019, last year, a very able judge ruled against his petition he had filed against the city for relief in this situation. And basically, the judge indicated that his request was premature because no development plan had been filed. And Matthew alluded to that mechanism. In August, I was contacted by the owner of this property, 211 Ash Avenue LLC. And they said, we'd like you to help us in connection with the imposition of this road upon our property. I said, gentlemen, I'm not going to touch this case without examining the property first, inside and out, and also having a very clear understanding about the tenant pool of this property. I was familiar with it as a result of this case, and frankly, it was a stain upon the community. I said, I'm not going to do it, won't take the case, but I will look at it. I did look at these 100 units, not all of them, but enough of them, and found that they had been dramatically improved on the exterior and on the interior. I also examined police reports, and that indicated an improvement, shall we say, of the clientele who were occupying these properties. 19 different owners, ladies and gentlemen, were involved in the ownership of these 100 units, 19. This client consolidated all of the ownership into their entity. That was quite an undertaking, accomplished in 2018. Matthew has alluded to the tax value. In 2016, it was something over $2 million. In the greetings that we all got in the last week or so, the value is now over $6 million. Wow. They paid, ladies and gentlemen, before any improvements, over $50,000 a unit to those 19 owners. When I got into it, examined it, I said, yes, I'll take the case because I believe that road is an unfortunate situation in its origin and its present situation. We have met with a few of the neighbors. One thing I never focused on is the traffic safety consequences of the city blowing 2 lanes through there, 64-foot width right-of-way, 2-lane road, and it is going to be a total mess with Dexter, Cox, ash, of course, ash down here, and of course, the bridge, as we all know and love, has got some age on it also. So it is a problem waiting to happen. I cannot imagine what folks were thinking about. But you know, in talking with some of the neighbors, I found out a little bit more of the history of this right there. And it's an interesting history, and I'll not share it with you here, but the origins of this road, in some respects, are somewhat suspect, but it is what it is. This was looked at on several occasions from 2008 forward. And the justification for this, for the denial by the city of this, was that it did move prospectively east-west traffic, that it had been approved in a public process with stakeholders. That's number 2. And the last item revolved around citing, interestingly enough, a 2011 action by the city, where this was established, and remarkably, what was proposed to come down between the Moorhead School and Central Prison, a road from Morgan down to Western Boulevard. That, in 2011, received a bunch of X's from the city. Now remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is pre-Dix Park, but certainly Dix Park was certainly in the eyes of some forward-thinking folk. To me, it's really extraordinary to do away with that and put that thing in, which again, I believe is absolutely problematic. Another reason I took this case is because this road will absolutely destroy the 100 units that have been carefully brought forward. 84 have been brought forward. There's 16 still to do. The next 3 are now in process, and work will begin on those in the next 30 days or so. The objective being to improve all of them, not only outside, but inside. So my clients are moving forward. This is not, Mr. Clem, a situation where they are doing this in order to tear it down. Rest assured about that. And if there's any misunderstanding about that for the city staff, I'll be glad to have a conference with them. But that's the situation. These will be destroyed. They now have a tax value, as it indicated, it's actually $6 million, I think, in $300,000. So something is going to happen because right now this road is an absolute burden upon this property. It's a burden upon that neighboring property too. But there's not going to be any development on this property with that road hanging over, and in my opinion, and these folks don't want to redevelop the property. The property is zone RX3, residential mixed use 3, which means something else if the road wasn't there. If the units were torn down, up to 3 stories could be built on that property. These folks have no such design, I can assure you. So that's where things are at present. I don't know what will transpire with our planning commission and our city council. The city council that turned this case down was 3 councils ago. So we don't know, but we're going to carry this matter forward. Safety concerns about which I knew nothing were raised at a meeting with some of the neighbors, and I'm going to hire a traffic engineer to point to the idiocy of that as far as an interface between that two-lane, used to be a connector, now a mixed-use street, and what is the network that's already there. So that's on the horizon in the case, but that's where it is. Apologize for taking so much time. Mr. Brown, you're up.
All right, thank you, Tom.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any, merit to saying, to considering, have the road go away, but requiring a bike and pedestrian connection through that area, which would allow more flexibility?
That's really a great point.
What was the question?
The question, and she will certainly correct me if I misstate, because I know her fairly well. But basically, what she's saying, I beg pardon? What she's saying is, well, is there a prospect for a pedestrian connection of some kind?
Maybe bicycles too.
Bicycle, yeah, of course, yes. That's, right now, what we've got in our narrowest point. That's right, Dr. Brown, I'll get this thing up here. What we've got right now is 118 feet width in our narrowest point. We have, the apartments themselves are 36 feet in width. So there's gonna be precious little opportunity with the parking, et cetera, to perhaps do a pedestrian bike way, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. Furthermore, there is some additional opportunity with the railroad. Now, I've had the unfortunate experience in my 40 years of doing this, of having to deal with railroads from time to time. And with all due respect to any railroad folk here, they are extremely difficult to deal with, just the way it is. They don't have to talk to you, usually, unless they want something, that's rare. And so they're difficult, but I think the city perhaps might be able to make some headway. If to do so would not in any way imperil the roadway, the railroad way. And frankly, I think there might be enough room in there, perhaps, to work that out. And that would be certainly, I think, a good thing.
If I may, the adoption of the West Morgan plan did also call for a greenway, as you're describing, along the edge of that property and into the railroad's right of way. So that's another project that the city council could decide to fund and construct at some point in the future. So to answer your question, it could go there. Tom is right about our relation with the railroad and having to work out those details, but it is in the city's plan to have a connection there. That was also one of the recommendations, and that was adopted from that planning process.
Thank you, Matthew. I've not discussed that with this owner, but it's something I've certainly thought about as far as that connection is concerned, and I'm aware of what Matthew's indicating there. So that is something that we would do everything we could to accommodate, I can tell you that.
So,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
just to clarify then, that type of connection, right now the roadway splits the property into those two pieces. So you would have a path that does not split the property, sort of skirts to go behind it, closer to the railroad, is that?
I think, ma'am, I think that the most likely candidate.
I think if you,
Yeah.
Tom, you can show it better.
That would be better,
Here.
yeah.
Yeah, the most likely candidate would be along the edge of the railroad right of way. I mean, this destroys the units. This is what Matthew showed as he very accurately indicated. But and here's your railroad. So yes, something could be done there. Perhaps a collaboration between the city, the railroad, and my client. Now, ma'am, Matthew will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that linkage for pedestrian bike was also shown in connection with this property. So it would get, if that became a reality, it would get from Morgan all the way over to Ash. I believe that plan. Yes, sir.
Real quickly, show with your finger where that apartment complex is, where it sits right now on this map.
Oh, sure. There it is, right there. This is it. This is the survey, and, so that,
Right through the middle of it.
yeah, it eradicates the whole thing.
Matt? Yes. From your presentation, it seems that the planners are not excited about this street. Am I reading you correctly?
That's a great question. So, what we know is what the state law is likely to require of us if the city wants the street to be built.
Right.
That means the city is most likely responsible for most of the design and construction costs, and most likely the acquisition of the property outright. And so that alone, to the tune of greater than $6 million, plus all the design and construction work to build that, and the removal of the 100 existing units. And so that's the question we're really having to ask here. Is the street connection of greater priority?
Is it worth it?
Exactly. There was another question about a different alignment to the street. This is what our transportation engineers came up with. It's also critical for other transportation, circulation, and safety issues for it to align with this other drive. And having it jogged at a pretty short distance like that can create conflicts and turning movements. And so we either want intersections like this to be farther apart so that cars have enough room to make that turn. But if they're too close and just offset, it's a bad situation. We try to avoid that. Also, there's like some infrastructure here that supports the bridge as well, and there are some steep slopes and things that might complicate the design and construction in a location other than this. And so this is what our team of engineers came up with.
And that will not thrill the Dexter, folks.
Are they required to do anything?
That's a great question. Are they required?
Just restoring the existing units.
Right, so are they required to do anything right now? And no, the answer is no. The existence of a street that is mapped on the street plan does not trigger any immediate construction or action. The construction of the street is triggered in one of two ways. The property under it is redeveloped and the city says, great, build your apartment and then build us a street. It's on the plan. So that's one way. The other way is the city buys the property and does it on their own through the capital improvements program. So the city buys land and builds streets and builds sidewalks and other things all the time. And so if the city wants to build this section of street, that would be the only other way that it would get developed. And that's a great point.
We don't want it. So would that be a threat to that property owner that the city could at any time come and purchase that or take that property?
So the question is that a threat to the property owner? The city can show up at any time and buy that property? I think, and the attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that is in the city's power to do so. I doubt that the city council would like to make such an unpopular decision to go and do that. I'm not one of them. There are two of them here. You can maybe ask them later what they would like to do, and so there's that. Yes?
As citizens, if we disagree with like the street destroying the units, what can we do to communicate that to the city and to, maybe that's
Does everyone hear that? So as a resident of the city, what can I do to tell the city and the people who make decisions that I don't like the street because I like the apartments? You can come to meetings like this and tell me. You can come to the planning commission meeting and speak to your planning commissioners. Commissioner Bob Geary is in the back of the room. He's one of the planning commissioners. They met today. They meet the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. They're public meetings. You can go and speak with them. I can give you an email address so you can email them directly. You can do that. City council meets. They're the ones who will ultimately decide what happens here. They want to hear from you. Two of them are here today. You can email them. You can come to the meeting and speak. There's tons of ways for you to get involved. And we all want to hear from you.
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood in the beginning, but I thought you were here to say it was a case that eliminate this section of street from the plan.
Right, that's what I was saying.
Yes, so what they're, that's right. So the other point is, these residents and applicants are here to say, we want to remove the street. And they do that by filing a comprehensive plan amendment with the city. And that's what we're discussing tonight. Someone is here to say, we want to get rid of the street. And when that happens, and someone says, we'd like to change the city's plan, someone comes to my desk and say, okay, Matt, take a look at this request, and then go tell people about it, and that's why we're here. And we provide that analysis, and so that's why we're here today. Someone's requesting to change the plan. Yes?
What is the timeline on this? Because I'm thinking with the Dorothea Dix Park and the land bridge that are talking about, it would be nice to see this within the context of the plans that are taking place. So what is the time frame for this amendment?
So the question was the time frame for the amendment? The application was before the Planning Commission today. They deferred action until February 11th. And it should take a few months, typically probably 4 to 6 months for this type of process to go through. Ultimately, City Council, the legislative body, is tasked with making these decisions. And so that is probably the timeline for this specific amendment to the plan. Now, when the street gets built, when and if it stays on the plan and the street gets built, that's really reliant on what the property owners decide to do with their property, or if the city decides to buy it and do it themselves. And so those are variables that we don't really know.
I'd like to.
Can we vote on this thing?
Yeah, but hang on a second. I think David Brown has 2 more points to make, and then, yeah, let's go ahead if you feel we're ready to take a vote. So I just want to do this, and then we need to wrap this up because we have more on the agenda.
Thank you, Don. I'll be brief. I'm a landscape architect at Withers Ravenel. My name is David Brown.
And he's a member of RCAC, by the way.
Here. The city has a connectivity ordinance. We call it the block perimeter ordinance. There are 3 blocks that are associated in close proximity to this road alignment. All 3 of those blocks are conforming with our UDO standards. So adding this street doesn't solve that problem because there isn't a problem to solve. And hit the light switch really quick. The other thing is that we've studied this parcel here for a couple of clients, and it's certainly the opinion of our engineers that you can't build this street piecemeal. This piece can't develop on its own, and this one can't develop on its own. The road would have to be built end to end, block to block as a complete project. Because the issue is that you have to put so much fill in the middle. There's a sag in the road that you're adding about 8 feet of fill on top of Wakefield Avenue, which is already a fairly steep street. So there are a lot of technical issues here that make this problematic, and that's my point. Thank you, Donna.
Are there any 1 or 2 more quick questions, and then we'll take a vote? Would you mind putting the light on?
The other thing is we haven't really heard what the city wants to do. The city is sort of not committal, right? Does the city want this project or not? Currently, it's on the city's plan.
That's correct.
That means the city supports it, but the city may change its mind.
Yeah, so the question was, does the city support this street? I don't speak for all of the city. Ultimately, the city council decides what happens here. The work we do is to evaluate the city's policies with these actions. And my analysis said that this request is inconsistent with the policies of the plan. Those plans say we should improve connectivity, maintain these connections, and increase bicycle and pedestrian connectivity. What the plan doesn't say, and what is not taken into account, is what is the cost and what is the city's legal responsibility. There's no policy in the street plan or policy in the city plan that says we should remove streets from the plan. They were put there to improve interconnectivity. And so really the question is, for the city council at the end of this would be, do we think the value of building this street at our own cost will better the situation in the community? And that is what is really at question here, in my estimation.
So now that I'm thinking about this, and I don't want to prejudge it because I get to vote on the planning commission, but is it possible for the city to say, we won't build this street, so if you don't redevelop the property, it won't be built. But if you do redevelop the property and you acquire more property, adjacent property, and come in with a larger development, then we want to leave this in place in the street plan to get it built at that time.
Did everybody hear that?
Yes.
So that's in fact the situation we have right now.
Yes.
Right, and so the city can decide to buy the property and build it, or the city is saying right now with the street on the plan that if you wanna redevelop your property, you've got to build the street. And without a redevelopment, these property owners are not required to build the street, and the city can decide at any time whether or not they want to buy it. That's not my decision to make. That's the city council's decision to do in their budget process. That's in fact the situation that is occurring today. Those are the options.
Let's take a look.
So it's no harm if the street stays and they don't wanna redevelop, everything just stays status quo.
I mean, that's not quite the case, Ms. Bailey. Right now, the sword of Damocles is hanging over this property. It is unsaleable.
So you say they wanna stay?
Yeah, but at some point in time, that's why they're enhancing it, continue to improve it. And they paid a lot of money to get in there, and they paid a lot to upgrade it.
And but they got it also for less than the other properties around there because it has this situation hanging over it. And they're expecting to profit off of that by removing that.
You know, I don't think that those 19 property owners, sir, were plugging in that situation.
I think maybe the concern is what mechanisms are in place for your client who has the interest in the parcel to, the street gets wiped clean, they recoup their investment from the renovation of each apartment, then they sell the lot, it gets redeveloped into a 3-story high-rise with 300 units in it. And now there's extra pressure on that street, and you can't actually, and the city can't actually do anything to relieve the pressure from that that's been still in place. On a longer term, a long projection.
Okay, we really, if you wanna take a vote, we can. I'm gonna remind, everyone that you have to be a member of the CAC, the Hillsborough-Wade CAC, in order to vote, so that we can present it. And I need somebody that will.
I make a motion that we vote against this street.
To remove the street.
To remove the street
Okay.
from the plan.
All right, and we need a second.
I
His motion, was against the street, so basically to allow the city to have this comprehensive plan amendment to remove the street.
Correct.
Okay,
So the motion was to approve the comprehensive plan amendment to remove the
Yes,
street.
right,
That's correct.
okay, and that was
To
second.
be clear, the amendment, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, removes the street only between Wakefield and Ash. The other segment remains.
That is correct.
Okay,
That is absolutely
okay,
correct.
go back to that, we're talking
So
about.
this is the condition today, and this is what they're proposing, just to remove a section from Wakefield to Ash. That's the request that Mr. Worth is making of the city today.
Is there
Okay.
discussion now?
Okay, I think we've had our discussion, we're really running short, so we'll
What
probably.
about the pedestrian connection?
Yeah,
right, maybe we can. I'm gonna keep the street there unless we resolve something, pedestrian bike connection.
That's another, we have a motion on the floor. That's another motion.
Did anybody second it?
Yes.
Okay, so, all right, we're gonna allow 2 more minutes for discussion, and then we will vote.
I'll bring a little more discussion into it, is one of my concerns, I live on Dexter.
Yeah.
And one of my concerns is you're extending a major road directly into the tiniest little neighborhood street, Dexter. What happens for all the traffic that decides they're gonna go on to Hillsborough Street from Morgan through Dexter and Cox? I mean, it just doesn't make sense now. If everybody's gonna turn left, or if everybody's gonna come over Ash and make a right and go in downtown, that makes some sense. What doesn't make sense is what happens when you're coming back and you're coming down the neighborhood.
What do you think about having a bike and pedestrian connection there?
I'm fine with that, but I'm not fine with, I never liked this, whatever it was, 10 years ago, or whatever. It just didn't ever make sense to me of why you would, I mean, I think it made sense because it was a strategy to tear those apartments down. I think that's why it was originally, I think
Okay,
that's originally why the street was, I
think that was the conceptual idea behind whoever brought this up originally.
Okay, one more comment and then we need to vote.
I have a question for the planner, Matthew. If we just leave this on the, as a paper street of the plan, if anybody wanted to, if the city wanted to do something with it later, it would come up again, yes, for consideration? If we vote to do nothing tonight with this, then there's no harm, no foul for anything. It stays the same as it's been. We've got property owners who bought a piece of property knowing that that was there. They had surveys done, and then we've got people who live here who live on the street, but nothing's, there doesn't have to be any work done if we leave a piece of paper on the street there, right?
Right, so the question was, what is some speculation about a potential outcome of leaving or removing the street? There are multiple development scenarios, some major, like tearing down the development and proposing something completely new, or other types of slight modifications that might be more minor in nature that would still cause the city's review staff up on the 4th floor development services, whose job it is to make sure people build new streets. There are certain types of transactions that trigger those improvements. And so it's not it might not be a wholesale redevelopment. There could be other potential triggers that cause the street to be built. And in that case, the city is essentially saddled with buying the property and doing it itself. And so if the conditions stay exactly as they are today and nothing changes with the site, then the street won't be built. But if there are a number of different modifications, including a wholesale demolition and replacement, that would essentially require the city to buy the property. Because the street and development other than a house or two cannot coexist on a piece of property today. And all practical matters of the needs for constructing and developing the new street and how much developable property is left afterwards.
Okay, let's go ahead and just take a vote and, see.
Is Will's motion seconded?
Yes, go ahead. Second it. Okay.
So remind us what the vote is again.
Will, will you?
The vote is to go along with the amendment to remove that portion of the street from here to here from the comprehensive plan.
All right, all
Without consideration for pedestrians or.
Without,
That's
no,
what the city
that's
does.
not part of it.
They can deal with
That will be
That's not
another
part of it.
motion at another meeting.
Right. Okay, all in favor, and remember, you have to live within the CAC. All in favor, basically, of removing, the street on paper, raise your hand.
And I've got
And
a
I'm gonna
count.
raise, I'm gonna count this side.
Okay. And, 17 to 28.
Okay, all right. Now, all those voting against, removing the street.
I've got 5.
Okay, so it's 10 to 28. This vote is in no way binding at all. This is just, and as David said, this is a courtesy presentation. There would be, that is a good
That's
point.
what you get in exchange for taking out the street, put in a bike path and a
Okay, well, that is
pedestrian
something
path instead.
that is something that can be discussed as this moves forward. Okay, Mike?
What were our vote totals?
28 in favor of removing the street and 10 against.
Did you get
Okay.
counted once?
Yes.
You did, okay.
All right, thank you, we really need to move on.
Thank you all.
Matt
Thank you.
Paul is here to give us an update, hopefully a short update on,
Thank you.
Z417, okay, 17, going back 3 years ago.
Good evening. Yeah, since you've already had such a long conversation, this is just an update, but you have been wondering what's happened in the last 3 years since we were here. And this case was presented and it was voted on by the CAC unanimously in favor of it. So we're now at a point we're going back to Planning Commission and City Council finally.
Wow.
Angie Raleigh is here with me with Capstone. This project was built about 9 years ago. Let me just go to the aerial. So this is Valentine Commons. This is what we're talking about. This is stand-up apartments that was built more recently. And this started just as an effort to do some improvements in the courtyard and to just do, it's fully leased. It's a very successful student housing project built, again, about 8 years ago. But what triggered the rezoning, there was a master plan, which you can see here, it's a purple is a PD that was established, let's say, 15 years ago. And it also was over the Stanhope project. When Stanhope came through, they removed the master plan, only leaving it on Valentine Commons. They wanted to move some of the leasing space for the offices into a corner that had been vacant. The master plan called for retail space there. They had not been able to lease it for retail, so just moving the office space required a rezoning. And so that was the main reason. The other was, since the balance of the master plan had been eliminated, there were a lot of reciprocal easements and complexities because what had been originally envisioned as all this tying together no longer was the case. This just shows you they're going to activate the courtyard, which is not used a lot by the students right now. This is the leasing space that has been vacant that they want to move the offices to. One of the comments from city staff was to include bike racks within the parking garage. So why it's been on hold, post rezoning, we realized kind of midway through that to unwind a lot of the reciprocal easements, who was going to take responsibility for ME Valentine Drive, needed to be resolved and ultimately approved by the lenders, which took a lot of time. So we finally got through all of that and we're back on track. I see Peggy Seymour here. When we came through, a couple of the comments we were asked, not directly tied to the rezoning. One was, would they be willing to screen some of the refuse or trash cans between the parking deck and at the side of the building, as well as clean up and paint the stairwell, which has been done. So Capstone kind of carried out the things they had promised at that time. We're back on track to get the rezoning completed so they can start these improvements in the courtyard and try to get it done by fall when the students come back. That's it. Hey, Bob.
What sort of improvements to the courtyard?
Sure, absolutely, I can talk about that. Right now, we have a photo. The courtyard is just flat grass, not an active space at all. And what's really triggering this too is, the community continues to grow. There's another project that's coming, the landmark project. There's a lot of amenities in these student housing projects. And we feel like this space right in the courtyard has been very passive. We'd like to have more landscaping. We'd like to soften up some of the landscaping. We'd like to have some things like maybe some seating areas, some bench areas, some cabanas, some shade, maybe some soft seating like hammocks. Just make that space a little friendlier, because when you walk from Emmy Valentine into the front door, it's not getting used that much. And it's not getting used because there's not comfortable seating, there's not shade, there's not space that's comfortable and inviting. And so we don't think it'll impact the community so much per se, but it sure will enhance, I think, the experience of our residents as they walk inside.
So Mac, is there anything we need to do? We already voted on this, right?
That's right.
So you're just here, just giving us.
Yeah, just to let you know, we're finally.
Okay.
Why we got held up?
I just want to know where we were. Thank you for remembering us. Okay. Well, thank you. We appreciate that. And okay, now we're going to move on because we are running out of time. Okay, so tonight we have invited our new two new city councilors, our District D councilor, Saige Martin, and our new at-large city councilor, Jonathan Melton. so they can kind of get to know us a little bit, we can get to know them, and I'm hoping we can have a Q&A where I was hoping we'd have a good 30 minutes, so, you know, we absolutely have to be out of the building by 9 o'clock. Really, I would say no later than 8:45 that we can be in here. And so, do you gentlemen both want to say a little something? And then I thought we really want to have a Q&A.
Okay.
So, why don't you say, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you all for being here. I see a lot of faces that I've seen since my first committee meeting really early this morning, so thanks for sticking it out and coming to this. We have been hard at work down at the City Hall, and so happy to answer questions in particular as it relates to what we've been up to. I can give a few updates about District D in particular. On February 4th, there are 2 public hearings slated for traffic calming projects. Oh, you did? Before we got here. Beautiful. Please come. And if you know neighbors that should come, let them know. Did y'all talk about I-440?
No.
Okay, so I-440 calming or widening and the imposing doom that will happen with Hillsborough Street and Blue Ridge Road closing in the fall for 2 years. I'm putting this out there now so that people can start to get used to the idea and not freak out when it happens. So this has been in the works for many, many years. What will happen at about 10 days after the state fair ends is that intersection of Blue Ridge Road and Hillsborough Street will close, and that sections of Barrel Road will do the same. So that there's an underpass that's been approved, will drastically improve that entire area of our district, and it's a huge improvement, but it will impact the area for 2 years. So as you were talking to folks and it comes up, I'm in touch with the Hillsborough Street Service Corporation folks and the Blue Ridge Corridor Alliance folks, trying to push NCDOT as well as the contractor Lane Construction to be very upfront and transparent about what is being closed and when. We're starting to see some small closures and detours happening now as they prepare for that. So as that happens, let me know if something happens and you hear about it. When big projects like this happen, sometimes people point the finger at the other person, so it's NCDOT pointing at the construction company and vice versa. The city frankly has nothing to do with it, but I see my role and the role of some of the groups out there at least trying to be the mediator of getting information to you and to our business owners, so that we can make it as easy as possible to navigate that section of the city. So just trying to get that information out. We've had two work sessions on affordable housing, and another on our parks and greenway system, as well as Dorothea Dix Park. So if you were not able to attend any of those, they are online. As we prepare for our upcoming bond referendums, which are will be on the ballot this November, I encourage you to stay involved. I will continue to show up and share information. I will want your feedback and your input on what sounds good and what doesn't, and what you want to see and what you don't, because we have big decisions ahead of us. And so this council has just started that process of what this will mean for us and what it will mean for the city. The votes start, there's a series of votes that have to happen. Those will start in May. So things are happening quickly, and staff is working very diligently to kind of get us prepared for what that will look like. So in the months ahead, be prepared for me to come back kind of rapid fire with options, and I will want your feedback. I will stop there.
Okay, that's good, and then
Jonathan, do you want to, yeah, I don't know what I'm leaving you.
That's okay. Hey, I'm Jonathan Melton. I'm one of your at-large council members. I do not have any District D updates for you. I do send a summary or update after our council meetings out to whoever subscribed to my listserv. I posted on my Facebook page, so if you're interested in getting that information, go to my website, jonathanmelton.com. You can get that email. Because I'm not a district rep, I usually defer. I'm working on deferring towards the district council members for issues district specific. So certainly if there's an issue in your district, please reach out to Saige. But I am also here to provide assistance as well. And if there's something citywide or even in your district that you'd like to talk to me about, I'm all open. So.
Oh, all right. So I really want to have as many questions as possible. So just raise your hand, and then if you want to direct it to a particular one or both of them. So Charlie.
this is mainly in our district, but I wanted to cut for both of you to have,
Okay.
fire us out. And is there something you can do when they're building these apartment buildings, they keep the sidewalks open? They do that in big cities all the time, they put covers on so you can walk underneath. This thing will have to cross one side of Hillsborough Street and then go down 2 blocks and cross it to the other side. And there's gonna be more and more of this construction.
It's a great question, and not something I've been asked before, so I don't have the answer.
Oh, I don't expect to have the answer, I would like you to.
But I
say
will,
that.
no, I will.
And if both of you look at it.
Yeah, no, I'm going to take the.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
One of the issues I have asked us to have a work session on is as it relates to greenways and seeing what we can do to keep greenway systems open. Because if we're going to ask people to use them as a way to get around, if they close at dusk, like the parks, if they're closed on holidays, if they're closed for construction, that's not conducive to using them for travel. So I mean, I certainly support the sidewalk issue. Well, I'm not sure what we can do about it, but we can look into it.
All right, and Saige, if you get answers back to me, I will get them out next, or
Are you
get them on our
taking
Facebook
notes?
page.
Okay.
Okay, Sally, I think you had your hand up?
I think a lot of people here are interested in quarry.
Okay.
Did you bring quarry rock to throw at us? Maybe some coal ash?
And, you know, I just wanted to know what your positions are on the quarry and how your position is reflected in your votes, your recent votes, and why. Seems like a lot of people are against the quarry. We still have Dickie Thompson and Saige representing the city. And I read the article in the News Observer, but it still seems that we could appoint someone that has our interests at heart, even if you're not ready, even if you want to replace that person in 2 years. 2 years is a long time to have to live with that. So
Let's hear from both of you what your position on that is.
I'm happy to so there were 2 recent votes for reappointment for our 2 representatives, the RDU Airport Authority boards. The question was, I guess as that relates to the issue of the quarry, which I'm assuming everyone in this room knows about that issue. Okay, so we don't have to do a primer on that. I think our answers are going to be very different, and this may not be a very popular answer in this room, but I've been consistent in this response. I did not campaign against the quarry. I don't know that this is an issue that you can say, are you on this side of it or that side of it, yes or no. If you are making me say black or white, yes quarry, no quarry, I'd probably fall more on the side of yes quarry, to be honest, and I can explain that to you. But that was my position throughout my campaign. You can find me answering questionnaires about it that are still online. So I didn't campaign against the quarry, so when I was making an airport authority vote, or that's really the only time this issue's come up, I didn't really bring that into my consideration. The RDU Airport Authority does a lot more than just this potential quarry lease that's come up in recent years. So it didn't really weigh much in my consideration.
Well, both of our representatives are from the construction industry, really.
And I'm happy to answer that question too.
And it would be nice to have.
I agree.
Another viewpoint representing us for the environment or recreation or,
Right.
you know, I don't even know.
I didn't answer the second part of your question. I met with Dickie, I met with Dee Freeman, who was the other nominee. I liked them both, but to be honest, I felt like for the next 2 years, Dickie's board experience on that board would be helpful. They have a couple of other members serving first terms. They have a lot of big projects coming up. I'll be completely honest, and this may not be a very PC way to say this, but I'll just say it. I objectively felt like I was presented with 2 older white men as nominees. And I have nothing against old white men. I hope to be one day. I say this a lot. My dad is an old white man. I love him very much. But I had one who has been on the board and could have some relevant board knowledge, and then one brand new person. If we make a change to our airport authority appointee, I would like to nominate a younger, more progressive candidate, someone with a diverse background, and maybe someone with, diverse in their citizenship or ethnicity. And we didn't have that as a nominee. And I told Dickie I would always support him for 1 more term. So 2 years, and hopefully if we're in the position to make the appointment again, I hope we can identify a younger, diverse candidate, maybe one who's going to be directly affected by the impacts of climate change, may have a different opinion on that. So it is what it was. So I will just say I have remained consistent in my position, and that's all I hope you can ask of me as I continue to cover.
And this is, where to start? So on the board appointment, we worked hard to try to identify, to Jonathan's point.
And I'll just say, Saige and I did not agree on this, so this is, go ahead.
We worked hard to identify someone that met the needs to get to 5 votes. And when D was presented as an option, we immediately put him on the docket as an alternative to Dickie so that he was there. But I did not stop trying to find someone else that was preferably a woman, preferably a woman of color, ideally had an environmental background. What we have to remember though, in addition to that, that is such a high performing board in the sense that you're dealing with federal regulation, state regulation, local municipal regulation. This is not a nonprofit board, which is not to knock nonprofit boards because they're very high performing nonprofit boards, but the level of intricacy that that board deals with requires someone who can hit the ground running on day one. And so you have to find someone who has such a finite skill set, and so to have 6 weeks to do that from the moment that we were sworn in on December 2nd until the moment that we had to vote for Dickie, it gave up me really no time when I'm drinking from 12 fire hoses and trying to get my feet under me. So D was one viable alternative, and so was trying to get folks rallied around him. At the same time talking to, I had people that worked on my campaign that have worked hard on the quarry issue and reached out to them and reached out to other folks that helped me on my environmental policy and said, who do you know that could help me, who could fit this role? And they literally were like, I don't have anyone yet. All of that to say that this was easily the hardest vote I've had to take thus far at the table. And when I realized that not only whether I voted for Dickie that day or when we got back 2 weeks later, and Corey Branch was absent that day, but I knew, he had voice that he would support reappointing Dickie, and so we would have 5 votes then. For me, it was over. And so it was just, let's keep the ball rolling, let's move forward. And for me, what was more important at that point was, how do I have a very serious conversation with Dickie about the role that he plays now? He has 1 term left. And what are our expectations as, in his final term, as our board appointee? And second, having very serious conversations with the CEO of RDU Airport Authority and saying, one of the first things that I said when we had our first meeting, which was 2 weeks before we had this vote, was, why do you not have an environmental impact advisory committee? So outside of, say we get rid of Dickie, for instance, that's only 1 vote. Granted, I think that having that voice and that vote is critically important, but it's 1 vote and that does not stop the quarry. What could be far more impactful is having a larger voice that helps think through the complexities and the needs of the airport as it grows over the next 20 and 30 and 40 years. And so they said, that's a fascinating idea, let us think about that. And so that is a conversation now that's going on as they look at their internal committee structure at the airport. So for me, it's Dickie is one very small part of this. And we have to think strategically about all of the other levers that we can push and pull. And so it's not black and white to me. And whether we get 2 years with Dickie, whether I'm re-elected again, whether I even run again, to be seen, what I know will happen is that whoever is sitting on council in 2 years will be handed a list of vetted candidates that are incredible environmentalists and can start on day 1 ready to go and would be incredible assets to that board because that is what we are working on now.
Will?
Question, I guess, the answer from each. Dix Park.
Yes.
Dix Park was designed and it was put through with a consensus vote from City Council. It was loaded with imperfections. The council members voted for it just to keep it moving forward, but it is ripe with errors. And yet we're moving forward, and my question is, and I know the Parks Department is really on this, would it not be wise to have an independent, comprehensive evaluation of that plan and further of the process, because the process was flawed, seriously flawed. Before we go forward and make decisions and put in things that are gonna be 20, 30, 40 years down the line before they really come on. And one of the points is they're trying to commercialize it. We don't need it commercialized, and I know you take an opposite stance on that, Jonathan, but my point is, would you favor an independent, comprehensive evaluation?
Sure. I'll take this just because it's first. It's in the
Happy.
district, and
Go ahead.
I talked about it at the table.
You take all of them.
You're not getting off that easy. So, that's the first time I've heard of that, and that's a really interesting idea. So would definitely be interested in talking about that with park staff. I think that this council is very well aware, especially as we look at the parks bonds that are coming before us, that what the Conservancy is offering us, and I will not be a fan of the Conservancy as I continue to start to say this publicly, but I do not feel that they are being good partners to the city when they're requesting $150 million in this bond when we're dealing with an affordability crisis. I think that Dix Park can be great, and I think that it can be wonderful. I think that what it requires is for us to take our time and to get it perfect. And that throwing money at something rarely results in getting it perfect. And what I know is that we have the best minds working on it, both from the staff perspective and from the community perspective, and everyone wants it to do well. No comment. What I think we need to do is say, there are certain projects we really can see moving forward in this first phase, and I think that that's what we can commit to funding. But to your point, I think that there are various things that we need to say that's not worth funding right now, and we need to reevaluate. For instance, the land bridge. That's something that I brought up at our last work session. I said if we really care about equity, and if we care about race equity in particular, then this land bridge across Western probably isn't the best investment when we don't even know the impacts that it will have. What would be far more advantageous for us is connecting Chavis Park to Dix Park in the first phase, and connecting downtown via bike ped path. And so, and I know that the mayor supports that, and I think that we're taking this look very critically, and I think that we will need community support in this, should there be the support. There are varied interests, and we're in a tough spot. I mean, I'm just gonna be completely frank with you. I have nothing to gain from saying this, from the powers that be at the Conservancy, who are great people, but they have an agenda, just as we do at City Council. We have to have tough conversations about where we're investing our funds. And I think that right now, what I feel is most comfortable is something that is a low-level investment to get the first few projects off the ground, prove to the community that this can happen. But I'm not comfortable, kind of doing what they're requesting right now, but I think that an independent kind of review is certainly an endeavor that we could look at.
Yeah.
And maybe you can follow up with an email.
Emails to both of you.
Okay.
Do you want me to answer it?
Yes,
Yeah.
Jonathan, and then there's somebody.
Don't let him off.
That's not something I have been asked before or thought about, so I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I think anytime you can take another look at things to make sure you're doing it the right ways, not a bad idea. I will say I wouldn't want to do anything that would slow down sort of the work that we're trying to put in place right now. A lot of the issues with Dix Park are really ways off. Right now I know we're trying to get Phase Now together, and then looking at funding Phase 1. And Phase Now is like things that you think about when you see a park, like bathrooms and sidewalks and benches, like that should be moving forward. There's a phrase that I keep having come up while I'm trying to like learn this role and be in this role, is that you have to like fly the plane while you're building it. So I kind of feel like that almost could be appropriate with the park. Like we need to move forward with our plans, but I'm all for making sure that we're reevaluating as we go.
Okay, we have a question back there in the corner.
Hey, to follow up on the Dix Park thing and also kind of piggyback on my last question before the council is, there have been, and you guys have run on the council, but in the past year, there's been 238 people who've spoke for the city council, and about 40 of them have been about Dix Park, and most of them have said phase A, let's go forward with that, but let's relook at things. And so my curiosity is, where can people find information on somebody on an issue? 40 people have spoken before the city council about something. What is their answer? Where can people get the information that somebody has an issue and 30 people show up for the PACT or police accountability? So it's city council, but it's also our neighbors. We want to know where we can find answers to questions on issues that have been put before you.
So if someone comes during public comment and asks a question, like where can everybody
Not
find
someone, about 30 or 40 people.
Okay.
Yes.
30, 40,
An
100.
issue.
But if an issue, I'm just trying to understand the question. If an issue is raised and then an answer is given, how can everybody access the answer?
No answers are given. Or if an answer was given, I don't think 40 people would continue over a year to come forward with the same question.
This might be a bad question to ask us because we've only had like 3 public
Well,
comments. I do know that we usually, if it's something we can address at the table, it gets addressed. If it's not, we'll ask Ruffin or staff to follow up.
I think this relates though
But I don't
to your question that you brought up at the last council meeting, which was in part about increasing the accessibility of our
Communication and
website
transparency,
and
yes.
the ability for residents to, which if I'm remembering correctly, it was late, but for residents to really understand what is going on and not having to look through the layers and layers of sites. And the city staff have gone through a big renovation and they're still working on it. But I think that that's something that we're looking at on this council is how do we make it easier for people to be engaged? And I think that that's a great question that you're raising, which is almost like upvoting something. So, you know, online it's like people upvote a question, like even on YouTube, right? People make a comment and they like it and then it starts appearing higher up. So in this case, it's we have 40 people show up over the course of a month who are asking the same question.
Yeah.
And generally, if we do get a staff report, if we can put that online or something, then it gives people the opportunity.
I support that too.
Yeah. And I think because you brought that up, sorry, real quick, Michael, because you brought that up at the last council meeting during the citizen petition period, I bet that will be reported out on at some point. So I will check back with you, and please do, and then we can kind of close the loop.
And I just also want to add, sometimes folks do come to ask things that we actually can't help with. The council isn't. We have a lot of speakers, for example, asking the council to do things that are illegal. So that's for stuff that we can handle. We should have a place where answers are given, and then anybody can access that. I support that as well.
Okay, Michael.
Yeah. First of all, thank y'all for staying late. But I have a question, and I'd like to hear both of your opinions on this. But Saige is on the committee this morning where it was discussed about Airbnbs and then about infill development. And I want to just address the Airbnbs right now. During the meeting, Travis said that it looks like the city might not be able to regulate how long somebody can rent an Airbnb. And I don't think that's an issue for a partial rental when you've got a homeowner who has an active interest in that property. I think it is a problem for full house Airbnb. I think the combination of full house with 365-day-a-year rental possibility is a recipe for disaster. And this morning, Saige mentioned your concern about what Airbnbs might do, and I think this particular example to housing affordability. If housing starts getting bought up by institutional investors. And of course that's, we don't know how it's going to unfold, but I've heard from people coming from other cities on the West Coast that that's a big problem. And I assume you guys are going to be voting in the not too distant future on Airbnb rules, right?
It's still in committee, yeah. I think that we're still a ways away, but.
So after the meeting, I talked briefly with Mayor Baldwin and quizzed her about it, about the issues about both a number of days you can rent, and she thought the same thing. And if we could control the number of days you could rent a full house, I think full house wouldn't be a problem. But I think the two combined is going to be a problem.
And I would agree, and I think that, so actually one of the Verbo representatives was in the room, and I didn't realize that, so he talked to me after, we're gonna meet, and
that's vacation rental by owner.
Which I just say Verbo, I don't know how
Verbo.
That's what I say. So I met with the Airbnb rep who's out of the Miami office. One of the things that I think we could do, I know that it could be a big lift on staff, I'm curious if there is no way through the existing company companies, if there's a way to verify the amount of days that were rented. So on a from a staff perspective, to say how many days was it actually rented, yeah, I don't know even how it would start to go about trying to verify that. But if there's a way through the actual system for Vrbo and or Airbnb to supply us with the data to say this is how many, if you want to do business in the city of Raleigh, we're happy to do it, but you have to, the people that are using your system have to abide by our rules, and these are the rules. They supply us with the listing and the amount of days for that city, and someone would get fined. I mean, these are the sorts of conversations that I think now that we're saying we're willing to be less restrictive overall, right? Like, we don't want to make it such a burden, but we're still going to have expectations, and you have to abide by them. So we'll meet in the next couple of weeks, I would assume, and I'm with you. I mean, I think that the whole house rental is even more, could be more burdensome potentially than the kind of the alternative.
Yeah, because if somebody buys a house, I don't think anybody wants to live next door to a small hotel, which is what a 365-day-a-year full house rental will become, and then it will probably become owned by, could be owned by a hotel chain or something.
Jonathan, do you want to address that?
Sure. So I'm not on the It's
Saige,
happy. I'm not on that committee. I'm not on that committee. So I do not have the benefit of looking at I guess I could pull the data myself. I wasn't there. I would like to look at it with fresh eyes when they move it out of committee at the council table and whatever recommendations they come up with. I will say this, I support whole house rentals with reasonable regulations. So whatever that will be able to look like. I think that we need to be looking at what some other cities are doing and borrow best practices. I don't think there's a perfect answer. I think if there were, someone would already be doing it and we could just steal that idea. But I can assure you that what is not the right idea is a whole house ban. And that's what we had before. So let's try to figure out how to make it work. And whenever it comes to the council table, happy to look at it. But I do support whole house rentals with reasonable regulations.
I've just got a clarification question. This might go to you. What's the difference between an Airbnb and then just a property management company renting a dwelling out like they could, any house?
It was long-term rental, short-term rental. So usually
we're talking about a long-term rental though. That's the point you're making, right? Like,
no. It's sort of like a long-term rental that you can chop up and rent to different people all year. So a typical long-term rental is like I rent a house for a year. Long-term rental, it's me in that house. Short-term rental would be I own a house, I rent it to 12 people a year at different times. And so
and two things, right? So you're having people constantly now
okay.
versus renting market rate rental that, and there's been lots of studies done that show that whole house rentals that takes that house off the market for rentals, so it exasperates already tight housing markets and drives other market rate housing up.
Right, we're all concerned, the city council wants to do a moonshot, as our mayor says, on affordable housing and on the park, and putting pressure on housing prices by whole house rentals that are available for rent 365 days a year. It is going to push out a lot of people out of affordable housing, and you're going to have institutional investors coming in buying up properties.
Right.
And I've heard it said that we're not a tourist destination. I don't believe that that's an issue.
It
We're
doesn't
very
matter.
popular area.
And they are 200 to 300. They are 200 to 300% more profitable than just a regular like monthly rental. So it would. I want to ask a question.
just say I appreciate your concerns. I look forward to Saige fixing it.
There's also a gentleman over there that's been trying.
Okay, go ahead, and then I'm going to ask a question.
How transparent are VRBO and Airbnb being about their screening of their customer base, their provider base of properties, and that do they have reasonable protections for corporations coming up with sort of lists of sellers and houses that they own behind the scenes?
No.
I have seen, it could be anecdotal, but still data of cases where there are sort of shell companies that have Bob and Sally's house.
Yeah. But you can start to tell that they own lots of places.
And they have
So I asked the staff person from Airbnb that question very bluntly, and she said that's something that they're trying to figure out internally how to manage that issue. They're aware. They're not there yet, but we talked about it this morning that one of the ways that they helped Charlotte navigate the issue was helping them through a registry process. Charlotte already had the tool in hand, but was doing a terrible job marketing it. And so one of the things that we can do is through the permitting and registry process on our end is actually require you to register your name and or business that owns the property. And then something that we can do over the first year, the mayor said this as well, over the first year we can track, is there repeat kind of offenders? And if so, that's when we can say, okay, here's the data from the first year. Do we need to cap it at 2 or 3 properties? And it's hard to kind of see which way the wind's blowing without the data. We know that is how people are, kind of buying up the homes and then making this money. Without the data, hard to figure out how to manage it in this specific context in Raleigh. What we do know is it's less than 1% of the housing market is being used by these short-term or long-term rental companies. But when we change the policy, that could change as well. So we want to put these policies in place and then monitor it very quickly and accurately with staff.
It seems that, as long as there's sufficient transparency and then enforcement if things go awry, that experimentation isn't a bad idea, but as long as there are those two components.
And I think that the enforcement and the enforcement is the key part. And I think that making sure that staff has the metrics and the support that they need and the resources that they need to enforce is the key element. Otherwise, we're kind of saying it without giving them what they need to do the job.
Okay, I want to ask you, Saige, a question. It's kind of a continuation of Sally's question about the quarry. So I know you ran against the quarry, and
I didn't run it. I said that I'm morally opposed to the quarry. I want to be very clear about this.
Okay. Okay.
So, morally opposed. This is my statement. Morally opposed. This is morally opposed, and if I would rely on the city attorney to tell us if we should join a lawsuit. That was my statement.
Okay,
And
okay.
I still stand.
All right, well, this doesn't have anything to do with the lawsuit, but you just had an opportunity to vote for somebody who would bring some environmental perspective to the RDU AA board, which is greatly needed. And 2 of your other counselors, David Cox and David Knight, voted against Dickie Cox, and they voted for I don't know his last name, because he did bring an environmental perspective to it. So tell me, I'm not really clear why you didn't support him if you're saying you were trying to get other votes. Other votes don't matter. They voted.
Yes, they do, because you have to get 5 votes to get someone appointed. That's the rule.
I know, so why couldn't you have voted along with David Cox and David Knight?
Because we weren't going to have 5 votes to get him appointed. So that would have been 3 votes. That's how math works. So that's 3 votes, not 5.
Right.
And second, he didn't have when I answered Sally's question, I pointed to the exact things that I was looking for in someone. The first thing was that D, we put on the ballot as a potential. D was never my long-term, I'm absolutely for him. It was great. Potential solution, and I kept working trying to find someone else that met the requirements I was looking for, which was preferably a woman of color, absolutely someone with an environmental background, and someone that could hold their weight on the business front. Because at the end of the day, they have to sit in that chair, and they have to be able to sit at that table with some of the biggest business folks in the community and in the triangle and hold their weight.
Right, and I understand that, and we don't live in a perfect world, and we didn't have maybe a perfect candidate, but at least it did bring someone that was bringing an environmental perspective to it. But you still chose to vote along, even though your vote wouldn't have mattered. You could have still voted with the other 3, and there still would have been 5 votes. It would have been just because Corey was absent.
Correct, and then 2 weeks later it would have been 5-3 and Dickie would have won. So for me it was about how do we just move this forward.
So are you saying your vote is more important just to be part of the crowd?
No, what I'm saying is that what's most important is that we do the work that's important to move the city forward. And that what I'm doing behind the scenes and what I did that was important was trying to get to 5 votes, and we didn't get there. And that what I'm doing now with the RDU Airport Authority and the CEO and trying to create a committee that has an environmental impact advisory group is far more important than anything the last council did related to the quarry. This is the thing. People want to focus on getting rid of one person on the RDU Airport Authority board because that's the easy thing to focus on, right? You can focus on one individual and they're gone. The hard part is looking at an entire system that is fucked. Like, let's be completely honest. The entire system is screwed, okay? And that's not on RDU Airport Authority. That is just, we're looking at a system that is messed up. I'm an environmentalist. I fly everywhere. Well, I'm contributing to the problem, aren't I? And anyone in this room that flies. So that's why when I was sitting in the room with Michael, the CEO of RDU Airport Authority, and I thought, this is the sort of person, and I said to him, what do you need in your next appointee to the RDU Airport Authority? Trying to, like, always being open to the fact that I'm not the only person that makes a decision. What does this person need? And he told me, and I listened, and then I sat back and I thought, what else could we do? Whether we get D or we get Dickie, that was not my point. My point was, what else do we have the power to influence? Because our influence is far greater than any one appointee. And that was the picture that the last council never got past. They never got creative. They never sat down at the table and said, why don't we create an environmental impact advisory group? Why don't we expand the conversation? Why don't we get, none of that ever happened. And so yes, we didn't get to 5 votes. And I'm telling you, the morning of, I was struggling with who I was gonna vote for. It was not easy. And as someone that is close to previous council members, you know that this is a hard job. And it was the first 6 weeks. And I will tell you that your friend David Cox, and I respect him greatly, had years to put a name on the ballot. And he showed up.
Well, I don't think we need to go into.
Well, and now it's convenient for you to not.
Okay, all right, you want to.
Hang on,
exactly.
Hang on, step out of the way for a second.
Yeah.
I want to jump back in. Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Let's pretend, just for a second. Let's pretend we're not talking about quarry. Let's pretend we're voting on potatoes, okay? Or potatoes or broccoli, all right? Potatoes over here, broccoli over here. It was very clear that broccoli was never going to get 5 votes, ever, all right? So I think, and I can't speak for anyone else because I was squarely in potatoes, I think we all are appreciative, whether it worked out well or not, that someone has been appointed. We're not holding at the table. We're not all fighting with each other. Once it was clear broccoli wasn't going to get 5, we put it to bed, whether they liked it or not. We were able to move on. And I think that for a new council dealing with a lot of other issues, to not be fighting about potatoes or broccoli anymore is really, really important.
Okay.
So that's all I wanted to say.
Let's just take 2 more questions. We'll move on, and then we really need to get out of here. So, Candace, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, I really have to make a comment. The most disturbing thing I've heard you both say is repeatedly when you talk about who you want in positions, you go back to identity. And I'm a woman, and I know what it feels like to be discriminated against. I do. But when we have people in leadership positions, we need people who are qualified. The first criterion is not what their identity is. So that is really disturbing to me. We need to create opportunities for people to achieve their potential and to be brought up when they are qualified and can take certain positions. But we don't need to fill any position in this world by looking at someone's identity first. And I'm also a university professor, and I've spent my life looking at people for who people are, being blind to their identity, looking at their humanity, their capability, their character, their potential, and dealing with them on those grounds. You guys are scaring me that you put personal identity first.
Okay,
But that leads, to counter, what that brings to the table is an experience when we're dealing with things like environmental justice, and we're talking about, for instance, a woman of color. She brings an inherent, potentially, and most likely, an inherent understanding that, to Jonathan's point earlier, an old white dude is not going to bring. Right?
Which I love. Listen.
Again,
it may have been implicit and unexplicit. Qualified should have been first. I would like to appoint a qualified progressive young person of color. Qualified. That's a base level.
There's so many qualifications that we're looking for. What I'm saying is that we are looking for someone that brings a far deeper lens to the work than just the professional. And that comes from lived experience. So I hear what you're saying, but that is something that this council has kind of focused on for many, many reasons.
You've done nothing to assuage my concern. Don't take Howard Reid City down that road. You first got to find qualified people,
And that's what we're
blind
focused on.
to their identity.
Okay, Marcia, you had a question?
I want to say thank you so much, Saige, for bringing the idea of having environmental stewardship represented on the airport authority. Good work.
Thank you.
And any other time you can do it, please do it. To speak for that. Thank you very much. And I have a couple of names for you.
Thank you. Please, and if you have names, please.
Okay, we are really out of time, so if anybody wants to continue talking, please go outside. Thank you.